On March 22nd, 2019, this podcast featured Shannah Boiteau, who disappeared from St. Cloud, Minnesota, while on a trip to California during June 2016. In April 2025, Shannah's remains were found not far from where she was last seen. Today, we remember Shannah while I go over why I got this disappearance wrong. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. So what you will hear first is the original interview from 2019. Then after, I will read the blog I wrote on Patreon for Shannah's disappearance back in 2019, the blog I continue to write to this day. Then I will go through a variety of reasons of why my prediction of this being a murder was not, in fact, a murder. We're all here to learn, including myself. But first, Unfound News. I've started appearing on a show with longtime Unfound supporter D. It's on her channel on YouTube. It's a true crime trivia show. So far, I'm getting my butt kicked. Look for the links in Unfound's discussion group on Facebook. Next, I've had a chance to watch both episodes of the America's Most Wanted Missing Persons series. As much as I think I should be on a show like that, I'm not sure my approach would work well with all the scripting and editing. Finally, thank you to Jason Blair at the Silver Linings Playbook podcast, who recently mentioned me and Unfound during his coverage of the disappearance of Layla Santinello. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Shannah Boiteau, Angela Stark. Angela, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Let's start here. Tell the listeners a little bit about your daughter, Shannah. You raised her. Do you have any other children besides Shannah? How did they all get along?
We have 3 daughters total. Shannah's the oldest. We have Autumn, who is 24, and Dakota, that's 19.
Okay. So how did they all get along growing up, maybe being a little close in age? How did they do?
Just like normal sisters. They fight nonstop about, everything, but they defend each other to the end. So just like normal sisters.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that Shannah kind of looked out for her older sisters when they were all growing up, maybe in their late, maybe 10 years old, 12 years old, getting to high school? How was she with her younger sisters?
Good. Shannah was always the mother hen, watching out for her sisters, making sure everything going down, making sure everything's always going, smooth. Shannah actually got the girls off to school in the morning because I worked early morning. So she would, we would set all clothes and homework and get everything ready, and then they would get up. I would help them get up in the morning, and we had our morning routine, and we lived in town, so they would walk to school, and she was very protective of her sisters.
Okay. And what was Shannah herself into while she was in school?
Shannah was actually a really good student. She was very smart. She got really good grades in the science club, math club, all those, the kind of nerdy clubs.
Okay.
She, her favorite was basketball. She was very, very athletic. Basketball was her favorite, though, but she did play softball and did some track. But basketball was her favorite, and when she was the only one on the JV team, they wanted to put her on the varsity, but that wasn't fair. So she played JV her freshman year, which was really, really fun. We were really proud of her.
So she must have been a pretty decent player then.
Yes, very good player.
Was she self-taught, or did she have coaching from you or her father? How did that all happen?
No, she just kind of self-taught, and she started being in basketball when she was in fourth grade, and she just really liked it. And she really wanted to go. So over where we live in Wisconsin, there's UW Eau Claire, and they have a pretty good women's basketball team. So we sent her to camp every year, basketball camp, and she just really was really caught on and really liked it a lot. So we just continued to do it because she was, she was doing good. So she just kept going.
Okay. So she was pretty good in school, involved with some athletics. But we do have to talk about this, and and this kind of runs counter usually to what usually happens for people who do well in school and are into sports. But how did she end up getting caught up in drugs that obviously are going to play a role in our discussion today? Now that you look back at it now, we have to remember she just disappeared in 2016, not that long ago. But how did that all happen?
Like most parents of children that are in addiction, you don't really know. You don't. You start to notice changes, but it always, everybody's always like, well, not my kid, not my kid. There's something going on, but you really don't understand the depth of what, what happened, or what happens, what makes them turn. But we noticed her kind of 8th grade year, isolating more, getting, maybe, different friends coming over, ones that, we didn't really know, starting to lose interest in a lot of the things that she did. Basketball wasn't her world anymore. Shannah loves to cook. She's actually a very good cook, and so she was actually losing interest in that too. Not being so much participated in family activities, where we were a very tight family, with just not our immediate family, but like aunts, uncles, things like that. Not really wanting to go to like aunts for dinners or uncles for suppers, or things like that. Very irritable to her sisters, where before she was like mother henning, and now she really didn't want a whole lot to do with them. And then we just noticed her dressing different, acting different. So then, that's when we kind of started taking notice and talking to her about it. But, obviously she just, she denied it.
So you're saying you noticed this fairly early on. So 8th grade, that would be roughly 14 years old, something like that. And how long did it take, would you say, before you confronted her, about this? Was it a year, or, before she got into high school?
It was actually after we started noticing the change. We had this little dog, and the girls is in between this time too. The girls' dad and I had separated, so we weren't. We weren't together anymore. We had our separate houses, and the girls were actually with their dad for the weekend. And I was doing laundry, and I was putting everybody's clothes into their bedrooms. And the dog went right to her bed and pulled out a bag of pot. So that was, and that was her freshman year, or her, not, okay, 8th grade we noticed. So that would have been 9th grade. And that's when,
freshman year.
Yep, freshman year. And then we, I didn't confront her right away on it. Even though her dad and I, we were married, we were high school sweethearts. We were married. I got pregnant with Shana my senior year. We were married for 17 years. And then we just kind of, our divorce was not, it was very civil.
Okay.
We just knew that we were going to be together, and, but we still wanted to raise our kids the best that we could, just not together anymore. So we always, if one would find something or do something, we always made sure that we talked to each other first before we did anything. So we would agree on what was going to happen. So, we found the bag of pot, called, waited for them to come, called their dad, and then we sat down and talked to her about it. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
she denied that, that it was hers. She was holding it for a friend, and all that
Yeah.
good stuff. Hmm.
Yeah. Common excuses or reasons that the teenagers make. Maybe a lot of adults
Hmm.
say that same thing when they get caught with something like that. Okay. But even after that, my impression is it didn't really get better from there. It actually got worse.
Right.
And what happened through
We
10th and what happened through 10th and 11th grade?
in 11th grade, we actually moved. We moved to a bigger town. I thought maybe getting the girls out of a small town and into a bigger town where they had more opportunity, into a way bigger school, so they could get involved in more things, might help. And it actually backfired. She got into meth
Wow.
and got into trouble quite a bit. We then moved again. I met my second husband, and we moved to Stanley, it's a small town, northern Wisconsin. And Shana just did not fit in at all. And just like most, I know it's kind of a stereotype, but the drug addicts are always way more accepting than other people. And so that's the group that she kind of fell in, and she wasn't coming home, staying out, till all the cops were bringing her home, because they have the curfew, and she'd be out past curfew, and they'd bring her home. Stealing, her and some friends actually broke into a bar that was up the road from our house. Just started to get into a lot of trouble.
How were your two other daughters handling all this? I mean, not to get into their personal lives, but were they able to
Yeah.
avoid all the things that Shannah got herself into? What were they saying about all of this?
Well, they were pretty little. Dakota was only 6, and Autumn was about 10. But they learned just to stay away from her, because when she was using, became very violent. And she, we just would just have to stay away from her. But then it finally got to the point at our house that I guess the kind of the turning point was her junior year. Her and a friend had come home, and Shannah had to go to work. She was working at McDonald's in town, and she wouldn't get up, and so I went upstairs, and I shook her. I'm like, you need to be working a half hour. We need to get you in the shower. You need to get going. And I turned around and I walked down the stairs, and she came behind and she pushed me down the stairs.
Oh my gosh.
And we, went tumbling down. Autumn, my middle, she tried to defend me, and so she went after Shannah. Well, then they started fighting. And then I just remember Shannah yelling out, where is Dakota? She wanted to get in, dig into Dakota, who was only, 8.
Wow.
And I pushed Dakota behind a chair, let Shannah get to her, and we held her down and called the cops. And it took them about an hour to come to us, because we live, kind of isolated. And that was kind of the turning point when I said, that's enough. I love my kid and I want her to get better, but I had to think about the other two first.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So,
Of course, if they can't defend themselves, and she seems intent on hurting them.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, that was probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, was that phone call that day. Because she was 17, she did get hauled to jail. She just got put in a special unit, and that's where she sat. She got put on probation. And as soon as she would, like, one day off, they would let her out. It was like one day she'd get into trouble, and they would throw her back in jail. She did graduate high school. like I said, that was her junior year. Pretty much her whole senior year, she was locked up in jail.
I think you told me that she graduated, but she was in jail for graduation. Is that true?
Yes,
That's true?
That's true. That is
Okay.
true. She was in jail for graduation. The principal at the time, and it's right now I can't even tell you off the tip of my tongue what his name was. He was there, seeing a lot of the things that Shannah did in school, and he knew what was going on. So he lived in the town where the jail was in Chippewa Falls. So he would bring Shannah's homework to her in the jail, and then he would pick it up once a week and take it back. And he sat down, had a conference with us, and he had just said, she's going to have a long road ahead of her because of this addiction, and I don't want to make it harder with her not having a high school diploma. So it was, he made it possible for her to have a high school diploma.
Well, that was, he was a saint then, looking out for her.
Yeah.
Going that extra mile.
Yeah.
Wow. That was.
Yeah, very much.
Okay. All right. So she's in jail, going in and out of jail, quite a bit of time in jail, like you said, especially during her senior year. So roughly 18 years old. So she's in jail for graduation, but she does eventually get out. And at what point does she actually become a mother?
Not for about 4 more years. Our hell continued for 4 more years. It got very, very bad. She, when she turned 18, she went to live, or they let her out of jail before she was 18, and she went to live with her dad in Bloomer, her dad's and stepmom. They put tried to keep as tight as they could on her. They helped her get a job, and she didn't have a car, but they lived in town, so she would walk to work. And kind of the ending point with that one was they had woke up in the morning, and Shannah wouldn't come out of her bedroom. So her dad went into the bedroom, and there she was. She was overdosed. Still had the band around her arm with the heroin needle sticking out. And her sisters were in the other room. And so they had to rush her up to the emergency room and pump her stuff, do all that good stuff. And then finally, when she turned 18, she finally got to go to rehab. Because we have the big Ellie Phillips by us, but because she wasn't 18, they wouldn't take her. And then there also is a juvenile rehab in Green Bay, which is a couple hours from us. But because she was so close to 18, they wouldn't take her. So Shannah always fell through the cracks every time.
Okay.
So she got into the Ellie Phillips program, and that is a 21-day program, which but that's my opinion. I think you need more than 21 days. She graduated from that program, did good. Then of course went right back to her, the other people that she, used to hang out with. Shannah was in rehab a total of 4 times, and relapsed every single time.
Yeah.
She, at 18, she started doing meth. Shortly after she got out of jail, she got introduced to meth. And then after that, Shannah's a very beautiful young lady. Made her way up the drug ring pretty fast. At 19, she was her own, she was a dealer running drugs back and forth from St. Cloud or the cities.
Did you know this at the time, or did you find this out later?
No.
Okay.
We found, a lot of this stuff, Shannah has actually told me herself. When she finally became, clean.
She didn't eventually get clean. Right.
Yep. She, but then that's when she got into injectable heroin.
Okay. So she went from user to trafficker to, I guess, supplier. during these years, 18, 19, 20 years old, just getting busted, getting out of jail, going back into jail, in and out, all over the place.
Mhm.
Okay. But like you said, she, as you already mentioned, she did eventually get clean. What brought that on?
Yeah. We were she called us. She called me and her dad. Actually, we were at a group activity together with some other people, and she called and she told us she was pregnant.
Hmm.
And that was, she called and told us. I remember it was May 18th of 2014. Just remember that date. She was 21, or just about to be 21, because her birthday's in June. And she was ecstatic. Shana was always, babysat, loved kids. So she was super excited to have this baby. Obviously, she quit using right off the bat, but then again, she relapsed while she was pregnant. October of 2014, she was, would have been about 5-6 months. So she did use heroin while she was pregnant, but she sold heroin to a minor. She helped the minor inject it, and she overdosed, but she survived. So Shana was charged with a felony of endangering of a child. So she actually has 2 of those on her record, one for the minor and one for her unborn child. But I truly believe that is what saved her life, because she, she went through withdrawals, all that stuff while she was in jail, and I truly believe that's what saved my daughter at the time, and my granddaughter.
Right.
So, which we are very, very lucky that her use of heroin during her pregnancy did not do anything to the baby. So.
Okay. So who was the father of her child?
The father of her child is named Stephen Martin. They dated for a very long time. And I truly believe that Stephen really is the love of her life. But they are like Bonnie and Clyde. They just cannot be together when they're using. Just the fights and but neither one of them can live without the other one. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Toxic relationship.
Very much
yeah.
so.
Those come up.
Unfortunately.
Please.
Unfortunately, Stephen is most of the time in jail. He's only seen his daughter probably 4 times in the 4 years that she's been alive. She's 4. He was in jail for her birth, so we when he's doing good and clean, we do let him see her. We don't let him keep her overnight or anything like that. But we do allow him to see her. So, but it's just when he's around.
What were the stipulations, being that she eventually did have her daughter, and she did have these felonies and everything? What were some of the stipulations of her probation? As you said, it was October 2014 when this happened, these very serious charges. What were the stipulations once she got out of jail, maybe into 2015 and onward?
Okay. She after she had Millie, well, I'm just trying to think here. Well, she was in jail when she had Millie. The jail transported her to the hospital, and then we got to be with her for 3 days, and she was supposed to go back to jail. Shana was accepted into a new program that's fairly new around the country, and it's called Drug Court. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with Drug Court, but pretty much the baseline of it is if you have drug charges, you put in this program. It's kind of like a 3 strike you're out program. You work with the judge, you meet with the judge, they do stipulations with you, you have to do work programs, you have to do all different kinds of things, build your recovery, and that's drug court. Okay, so Shannah was in drug court, and her worker was very worried about the mother-child separation. So what they did was, instead of her going to jail, she had to have an ankle bracelet, but she got to stay with her dad and stepmom because they lived in town, and then that way Shannah could still raise her child. And
Okay.
then if she had to go to meet, she had to have so many meetings, and she had a really strict schedule, she would have to give the court times and dates of appointments, and then they would shut the ankle bracelet off, let her go to her appointment, and then if she said that she was going to be home at 10, that ankle bracelet got turned right back on at 10.
Wow.
However it was.
And so she was also
but-
getting random drug tests and breathalyzers, things
Yep.
like that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right, so those were stipulations. So she could somewhat be allowed to be her daughter's mother, and of course not be in jail and have somebody else raise her daughter. Maybe you, maybe somebody else, maybe a foster family. We don't know, but this allowed her to be a mother and try to get clean again, all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, and that's continued through 2015 into 2016. Is that correct?
Right. Right.
Okay.
She did. Mm-hmm.
Please.
She did. She did really good. It was after the birth of that baby. It was just like that was our little bit of a miracle. In more ways than one. Shannah always wanted her own child. She always, like I said, she was just she was a really good mom. She loved that little girl so much, and she would organize play groups with her NA and AA people. She became very, very involved in the NA programs with volunteering, giving speeches. I know that there was even talk, but it never happened, with her going to schools and talking about addiction, things like that. She volunteered. She finally got to the point where she was off of the ankle bracelet. She was, the court had approved for her to go out on her own, and she did. She got a pretty good job. She worked nights at a group home, and that was her niche, helping other people. So she
when you got to, if I may, when she finally cleaned her act up here, let's say into 2015, and she was sober again, I mean, did she talk to you about this addiction that she had? Did you finally get to say, this is a long way from her pushing you down the stairs. Did you finally get to talk to her about that and what was going through her head? And what did you learn?
She always, right. Well, that's when we learned a lot about what she had done. And she would always say to us, I can't never tell you everything I've done. But a lot of the, like we would be just general talking or whatever, we would sit down and she would tell us, these are the things that I did. I was a dealer. I was a stripper. I was, I transported. This is what I did. But she would never, and a lot of the time that she did serve in jail was because she wouldn't give up anybody. She just kept telling us that, I was in very deep. And if, I love my family, I don't want nothing to happen. So, she was, she had even admitted to that she had dabbled a little bit into the human trafficking.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
the people that she was tied up with were not good people.
Okay. Do you think that during this time that she was managing to stay away from those people? Or do you,
I do.
I mean, she was probably telling you that at the time, but now that you look back at 2019, do you believe that what she was telling you, for example, in the year 2015 was the truth?
That she was clean and seen under
yeah,
trouble?
yeah.
I do. I really do. I do think a lot of the things that she had said were true. I think that I think she was staying clean because she knew that she only had one chance.
Okay.
If she would have messed up, she was going to be on her way to prison for the remainder of her sentence.
Yeah, there
which
wouldn't
would
have
been
been
7 years.
there wouldn't have been any more ankle bracelets and things like that. This would have been behind bars and.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Behind bars, done. Yep.
Okay. The listener's probably wondering, well, you've spent a lot of time on this, Ed, about, her addiction, more than probably we usually do for a case, but we do cover a lot of missing people who have had addictions. That's not unusual, but I think that we needed to really cover this in depth as we have, because once we get to what happened with her disappearance, I think the listeners need to understand and put themselves in Shannah's position, and to try to put this all together, because we're going to be talking about a note that she wrote, etc. Does that make sense when we look back at these problems that she had 2013, 2014? Okay, does this all make sense? So I wanted to make sure that everybody understood Shannah's background as well as they could, before we get into the rest of this. So I appreciate you talking about it. I know it's not easy. We already have a disappearance, and then on top of that, we're talking about all of these problems that you had with Shannah, and frankly, these problems that she gave you. So I thought that was important. I just want to make sure we talk about one more name, though. We already mentioned Stefan, who is the father of Shannah's daughter. We need to talk about Kyle Firstenau. Is that how you pronounce his last name? It's a very interesting last name.
I'm not for sure. You're
Oh,
getting as
okay.
good of mine as that.
Okay, I'm going to just say it's I believe it's Furstenau. Firstenau. I guess it's very much like Boiteau, because I thought it was Boiteau, like we had talked about before we started this interview. Boiteau, and now we have Firstenau. Very interesting last names. Who is he, and how did Shannah meet him?
Kyle was Shannah's current boyfriend through pretty much. I didn't know Kyle that well. I only met Kyle twice. So I just, there was boyfriends kind of here and there. But this one actually stuck around. I think he was probably, I don't know, maybe around 9 months, right after Millie was born. I'm not for sure how they met, but I want to say that they met through a mutual friend at an NA meeting.
Okay.
They were together, probably about, like I said, about 9 months.
Up to the point of her disappearance? Up to the point of her disappearance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Really, we really didn't know a whole lot about him. He was very quiet, kind of reserved. Kind of and I'm going to get myself in trouble, but like the gangster, the white gangster kind of thing, He, like I said, I didn't get to know him very well. Shannah's dad and stepmom knew him a little bit better than I did, because he actually lived there with them. When Shannah was living with them while she was on the ankle bracelet, Kyle came. I don't really know the reason why he moved in there, but he did. And then
they have any problems with him?
No. While they were actually living there was zero problems. Nothing. There was no arguing. They both did very well. No reason to think anything. Nothing.
Okay. And did they move out though at some point? Did Shannah and Kyle get their own place at some point?
Yes. It was that winter. So it would have been the winter of 2015.
Okay.
Shannah finally saved up enough money, and she got approved and graduated from the drug court and stuff. And or no, she would not graduate from drug court. I'm sorry, but they allowed her to. She was off the ankle bracelet, and so she worked. And Kyle worked in Chippewa, so they found a place in Chippewa Falls. The cute little 2-bedroom apartment. and they moved out. She ended up getting a car, which was a really big deal for her to get a car on her own. And like I said, she was doing very well, very, very well. Her house was cute. She had new furniture. I mean, everything was everything was really doing good.
Really flipped around from like 2014.
Flipped. Yep.
Okay.
Completely flipped around.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe there was a thinking that maybe this Kyle guy was maybe actually good for her.
Yeah.
You know, especially since he has no problem living under the same roof as Shannah's father, and was kind of, Kyle seemed to be minding his P's and Q's and being a good guy and not causing any trouble, not being abusive to Shannah, at least under the roof of of Shannah's father. But I think what eventually happened, though, in 2016, that wasn't what continued between the two, was it?
No, it wasn't. Shannah, when Shannah was using, and she used for so long, sometimes Shannah would exaggerate stories. So, like, if she got into just like an argument with somebody, she might say, "Oh my gosh, she swung at me and tried to hit me," you know. Very we just even though she was doing good, we still had a lot of trust issues with her, with things that she would tell us. And now I just it breaks my heart that I didn't believe her. About 3 months before Shannah's disappearance, she started coming to us and talking to us about like her and Kyle would fight a lot. And they started fighting because Stefan wanted to see the baby, and Shannah would let him, and he was very jealous of Stefan because Shannah and Stefan, like I said, those two they were almost like soulmates. And Kyle did not like that Stefan was starting to come into the picture and visiting his daughter. So they would argue about that a lot. Kyle showed up to Shannah's work a couple times. Like I said, she worked night shift. And he would show up at the group home and try to get her to come outside to talk, things like that. And and then we found out later on after Shannah's disappearance that there were restraining orders put out, but she would always break them. So, but about 3 months after Shannah's
let's just be clear on that. So something would happen, there'd be a restraining order, and then she would let Kyle back into her life. She'd let him come back to their house or their apartment or whatever else. Is that what you mean by breaking? Yep. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
About 3 months after Shannah's disappearance, one of her friends, Angel Erickson, who actually was a really good friend of Shannah's, she came to something that I had, and we sat and talked. And she actually was the one that had told us about the domestic charges. Angel actually was the one that called us both times. He had choked her, broke bones.
Kyle had choked Shannah, broke bones.
Yep.
Just to make sure we use the names, because we don't use too many pronouns here. Kyle, in fact, you had told me that Angel had gone over there one day and had come in to see Kyle on top of Shannah beating her up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that was actually June 10th of 2016.
So 12 days before the disappearance date.
Right.
Okay. And on top of that, I'm not sure about the dates, but maybe sometime in July of 2016 or August of 2016, there were some court dates coming up regarding some of this prior abuse.
Right.
Is that true? Okay, it is. Okay. All right, so we have these things going on. Once again, you didn't know that this was going on, or you knew that there were problems because Kyle was jealous of Stefan. But like you said, you maybe thought that she was exaggerating a little bit because you said that Shannah sometimes did that. Was Shannah's father aware of any of this, being that he got to know Kyle better? Was he aware that any of this was going on?
No, he the same as I. We knew that she exaggerated, kind of
Mm-hmm.
exaggerated things to make things go her way. And like her dad had said that there was no issues at all when they were at his home,
Mm-hmm.
and Kyle came off as the big soft teddy bear, big
Yeah.
guy, but heart of gold,
Mm-hmm.
to take in that little girl and just treat her like she was his own. That's really hard to find, especially when you're only 21 years old.
Okay.
So,
And do you
no.
believe, let me ask you this. During that time of being that now she was confiding in you, telling you all about this, is it your belief over the course of, for example, 2016, getting into June 2016, that your daughter
Mhm.
Shannah was clean? Was she sticking to her probation rules and everything as far as you could tell?
I do not think that my daughter did any hard drugs, the hard ones, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking like meth, cocaine, heroin.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot guarantee you that she was not smoking some weed once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
because her drug tests weren't as close together as they were. And I did know that sometimes she would have a beer after work
Okay,
to
and she
wind
wasn't
down.
allowed to do that?
She wasn't allowed to do that via being on probation.
Yeah.
But drinking was never Shannah's deal.
Mm-hmm.
It had always been drugs.
Drugs.
And we confronted her about it and told her, you're on probation, you're not supposed to be doing it. But and I maybe have been wrong, but I just said to her, if you need to go home and have a couple of beers to unwind and go to bed and relax, I'd rather have you do that than go and shoot up some heroin.
Of course.
So if you have to pick the one,
Right.
that's the one I'd rather have you pick.
Okay.
So,
And to your knowledge, did anybody where she had this job, this night shift job, anybody at that job have any problems with the work she was doing there? Was she an employee in good standing at this work?
oh, they loved her there. Loved her. She picked up extra shifts all the time. She just,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that everybody always says this about their loved ones, but Shannah really was loved. Shannah had a huge support system. She had a ton of friends in both worlds, in her drug world and in her normal world. She was constantly doing favors for people and making sure that everybody always felt welcome and everybody always felt, warm and like they were part of an extended family. After their dad and I got divorced, I had a lot of girlfriends that were single but with kids. And I think that kind of brushed off on her how we would always have big dinners on the weekends. And if you didn't have nowhere to go, you came to our house. Bring your kids, drop them off, go to work, whatever you needed to do. And I think that just kind of carried over because she seemed to do the same thing. So I really do not think that, like I said, I do not think she went back to hard drugs.
Well, once again, I'm just asking your knowledge, what you experienced. Okay, people are going to have their own suspicions, but you were the one who talked to her, so your perception is that she was as clean that you had seen her in the last several years, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Let's just get to this now. Now the seemingly the pivotal date in this disappearance, and listeners should know that Angela checked up on some things, and there was maybe she misremembered, I don't think, Angela, you're the only one about the dates and some of these things that went down. So Angela was able to go back and firm up some of these things. Up to this point, I think the popular idea has been that what started this happened on June 17th, which would be a Friday, but you went back and checked, and you believe this all started on June 19th, which is a Sunday. And what happened on June 19th, that Sunday of 2016?
And of course, she never told us this.
And we'll get into that. We will surely get into that. But now what you've learned since then, what you learned about that day, what happened?
Okay. Well, that day, Shannah had to work. She had gotten home from work at I don't know, she worked night shift, so she would have been home at maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. Been up all night. She needed to go to sleep. And like I had said, we knew that she would drink a beer or two and then go to bed and help her go to sleep. Because she didn't like taking pills or anything because of her, opiate addiction and stuff like that. But it was Father's Day. And so she knew that she had to sleep before she go and have supper at her dad's, Father's Day supper. She had a couple beers, and the police decided to do a random breathalyzer on her. Well, of course, she blew, and she registered, which is a violation of her probation. Normally, they would take you right away, but for some reason, they didn't. They didn't. I'm assuming they just because I'm assuming that they just would have given it to the probation officer, let the probation officer do what he needed to do about it. So like I said before, Shannah was on the three-strike program, and this was strike number 9 with her. And so Shannah thought she was on her way to prison. She thought if the appeal gets this, she's on her way to prison.
Okay.
She did go to supper at her dad's. And when I spoke to him, he said, that she seemed really down, depressed, not herself. And she did not have the baby. She did not have the baby with her. Stephanie had the baby because it was Father's Day. Just so we can clarify that too.
Okay.
She went, and he just kind of talked to her, and what she had said to him is that she was tired from working a lot, and that some stuff had happened, but she didn't say what. She just said some stuff went down, and she's like, I'm preoccupied.
And we have to remember, if I jump in for a second, that at this point, nobody knows about any of the domestic abuse that she was suffering. Okay, so nobody knew about that. I'm sure that wore down too. But did Kyle go with her to her father's that day?
No, because there was a restraining order.
Oh, okay. So this is all right. So the restraining order. This was one of the times where she still had it against him, and she was sticking to it. Or do you think that she had Kyle stay at home, or for some reason, or
sure? And your guess is as good as mine.
Okay. All right, but just so we know, Kyle was not at this Father's Day dinner.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So what happens from there? So she's saying she's down, doesn't really kind of want to talk about it, and then what happens into the next day?
Okay. So that was Sunday. The next day, which would have been the 20th, Shannah went to work. And as far as we know, no one knew about what had happened. I suppose she just was kind of waiting to have the police come and pick her up,
Yeah.
But they didn't. She went to work and went home. She so that Monday would have just been, just obviously other than her thinking about what is going to happen, it would have just been a normal day.
Okay.
The 21st, which was the next day, I had texted Shana that morning. I hadn't seen her for probably 3-4 days. And I texted her and just, kind of hey, it's Mom, I miss ya. Can we hang out soon? What's been going on? And she texted back that she's been working a lot and that she was depressed. She was sad. And I texted back, hey, I'm your mom. We can talk about anything. Let's why don't you call me? And she's like, I'll call you tonight. And I'm like, okay, love ya.
So you and Shannah text each other on that Tuesday morning,
But then later that day, Stefan called you, and what did he have to say?
Actually, Stefan called Shannah's dad.
Okay.
And said that Shannah had never showed up to pick up the baby. She was supposed to get done with work at 3, and she was, or not 3, I'm sorry, she was supposed to pick her up at 10, get done with work, take a little nap, and then come get her. And Shannah didn't show up. So,
had this ever happened before, to your knowledge?
Oh, never.
Okay.
Mm-mm. So Shannah's dad, because he lived in Bloomer and she was in Chippewa, he called a cousin that lived down the street a little bit and asked her to run over to Shannah's apartment and see, maybe wake her up because they figured she, overslept. So she did. She ran over there. And when she got into the apartment, right away she seen on the table there was a piece of paper and a cell phone sitting on the table. So she looked at it and she called Shannah's dad Bud right away to tell him that there was a note and he needed to get here to the house.
To get to the place where Kyle and Shannah were living together.
Right.
Okay. And when in this process of this Tuesday, did Bud call you and tell you what was going on? When did you find out all about this?
I didn't find out till a little later in the afternoon.
Okay.
He didn't want to upset me.
Okay, I understand
right
that. Of course.
Okay. But when they seen the note and told us that, seen the note, read it, kind of took a look around the house and stuff, and then he called and told me that, she was gone.
Okay, so he gets over there, and the note is there, and we're going to talk about that note in a second, but her phone is also there, the phone that she would have used to text you earlier in the day, right?
Right.
Okay, so they get there, and what does the note say?
The note says that she had gotten into some trouble and that she knew that she was going to be going to prison and that there was something that she needed to do before she went. She asked all of us to take care of the baby, that she knew that she was going to be loved, and that Shannah loved all of us and that she would be back. And that's what it said. Okay.
Did it say anything specifically about, because at that point, none of you knew about the breathalyzer, right? None of you did.
No.
All right.
No,
and
it just said that she had gotten into trouble.
She wasn't specific about it.
No.
Okay. And I realize that none of you are handwriting experts, but did it look like it was Shannah's writing?
It was Shannah's writing.
Okay.
The police department did have a handwriting person look at it, but
Sure.
You could tell. And you could tell by the way she wrote. It was not distressed. Like it wasn't like someone had forced her to write it, and she was all shaky.
Okay. And so her phone was there, but what was the general state of the apartment? Was anything else missing? Was it completely cleaned out? Were there still clothes there? What did you see? What did Bud see when you went over there?
Shannah is she's a very materialistic person. So her furniture, all of the home decor stuff that was still there, but all of her personal items were gone. Her drawers were stripped out, and she had, the more expensive clothes. All that stuff was missing. Her hygiene products, hairspray, anything that you would need to just, if you were going on vacation. You took your best stuff and left everything else behind.
Huh. So it looked like she was taking off, like fleeing I guess you could play fleeing the jurisdiction because of this trouble that she got into. When you or Bud or Father read that part about how she got in some trouble, what did you think? I mean, we know what it might have been, but what did you think at the time?
Oh, no clue. Because we were just flabbergasted. We couldn't believe that this was happening. Couldn't believe that this was happening.
Okay. Okay. And what did you do next? What did he do next? What did you do next for the rest of Tuesday?
We just kind of waited, tried to get a hold of Kyle. Couldn't get a hold of him. He was not answering. Went through her phone and called every number that we could on there. And, of course, no one knew where she was, if they would even answer. Then we decided to call her probation officer and tell him that she, this is what's going on. This is what's going on.
Okay.
And we also did call the police, but there's nothing that they could,
nothing they could do. Nothing they could do at that time. Okay. So she looks like to you like she took off. And seeing that everything was gone, you must have thought, well, if she got in some trouble, it must be a big deal of trouble. Okay.
Well, we knew that she was on her last leg. We knew that she was going to go, depending on what she did, but we knew that she was going to be going to prison.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we go into, so you're worried about her. Of course, Kyle is missing too. You tried calling him. He's not picking up his phone. Is that true?
True.
Okay. So let's move to Wednesday. What happens then?
Wednesday, we're still trying to find Shannah. We did file, because it was the 24 hours, we did file the report for her to be a missing, she was missing. I'm going to say that my phone rang about 3:45 because I just walked in the door, and it was Bud, and he had said that he had just got off the phone with Kyle, and that Bud was on his way to St. Paul, just south of St. Paul, or not St. Paul, I'm sorry, St. Cloud, and that Kyle had said that Shannah was using, that she got very paranoid, jumped out of the car, and took off running through a cornfield into a woods, and he didn't know what to do.
Wow.
So Bud told him to call, ask him where he was. Well, of course, he had no idea where he was. But Bud asked him to call 911, and then Bud actually called 911 too. It was about a little over 2 hour drive for Bud to get to where to get to where they needed to be.
Okay, so let me just set this up. Where did Kyle and Shannah live? In what city? Chippewa Falls. Okay. And Wisconsin. Okay. And and when Kyle called Bud, once again Shannah's father, your ex-husband, where was he? Where was Kyle? What city was he closest to? What highway was he on when he made that call?
He was just off of a road that's big, huge interstate, I-94. And he was just south of St. Cloud, in a town called St. Augustine.
Okay. And how far of a drive would that, just approximately, how far from Chippewa Falls to St. Augustine?
2 hours and 52 minutes.
Oh, you know it exactly. Okay, very good. Thank you.
I know exactly.
All right, very good. Okay, so, and at that point when Kyle makes that call, during that call, does he even say why they're even there at all?
Nope.
Okay, so then Bud shows up there, Kyle's there, the police have been called. and our search is done in this area where Kyle says that Shannah jumped out of the car and ran into the woods. Search is done.
Mm-hmm.
For how long?
Actually, they did. That's where it gets a little tricky. Is Kyle stated that Shannah got out of the car in 2 different spots. The spot that he had said that she got out and ran, where he actually watched her run into this cornfield into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
The police did bring in a bloodhound. It was a couple hours later. They put the bloodhound in the car because it was Shannah's car, and he tracked her for about 300 yards. And then apparently the dog became overheated.
That's
so
one out of fitness dog for 300 yards. Okay. Not to
right.
make fun of the puppy, but that's interesting. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So they called for a second dog, but then it started to rain. So they decided not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the end of the day.
That was Wednesday, June 22nd.
June 22nd, yeah.
Okay. So just to clear this up, Kyle said that Shannah, is Kyle saying that she jumped out of the car twice, or are you saying that he changed his story when you say that she jumped out at 2 different locations?
Well, after we sat down and talked to him, well, they got done. They left the area, went back to the Stearns County Police Department, and Kyle had to give a statement. So then that's when kind of we heard his version of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would like me to start from what he had said happened,
sure, sure, absolutely. That's a good place.
Okay.
That's a good place to do that right now.
Okay. So this is the only part that we have ever heard from Kyle, and that was because Bud was sitting right there. So anything that he has said to the Chippewa Police Department, we have no idea. We are not. They will not allow us to look at any of the files.
Okay.
But Bud was sitting there with the Stearns County, the one in Minnesota where she actually went missing. Kyle said that that's when we heard about the breathalyzer.
Okay.
Or Bud had heard about the breathalyzer.
Mm-hmm.
Shannah was scared that she was going to go to prison. So she told Kyle that she wanted to go to California to see the ocean before she went to prison because she knew she'd never go again. So Kyle decided to go with her. But they had to wait for her check. So they had cash. So Shannah called, or she got paid on Tuesdays, and a friend of hers, Amy McNamara, who worked for Shannah, but also was a heroin addict. Shannah called Amy to ask her if she could bring her check to Chippewa. So Amy did. They cashed the check, but Amy needed drugs. So they gave Amy a ride to Eau Claire, which is the next town over, which is a pretty big city. And they could not get what they needed. So Kyle said they dropped Amy off as friends, and but Amy knew where they were going. Amy knew what was going on. That's what he says.
Okay. Amy knew that Shannah and Kyle were headed to California.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So this I-94 is a major. It's what you would take to get to where to get to it's a freeway. They got on there, and about 30 minutes from Chippewa is it's a college town, Menominee, and they actually stayed the night there in a hotel, which is very odd if you're trying to get out of the, if you're trying to leave, why would you only drive 30 minutes? And but he did not explain why. He just said that's where they stayed for the night. I do know that Shannah spent a lot of time in the Menominee dealing drugs. That's kind of like the halfway point. The drugs were coming from St. Cloud or Minneapolis, stopping in Menominee for the college town, and then headed to Eau Claire. So that's just a speculation of, we don't know why they stayed there, and he did not say. So instead of going west on I-94 like they should have, they switched over and headed north to St. Cloud, which is not where you would go to California. You're not going to go north. They were caught on a camera Wednesday morning at a convenience store at a town called Rogers, Minnesota, this little town. And we're assuming that they stopped there, got gas. It shows Shannah. We have pictures of Shannah at the ATM and a picture of her buying cigarettes at the counter. And Shannah is kind of like a hippie gypsy kind of girl.
Mm-hmm.
So she's always wearing long skirts and the long purse, stuff like that. And you can see, the stuff that she has on, and then you also see Kyle. That was at 10:30 in the morning. So they would have left
on Wednesday, June 22nd. Wednesday, June 22nd.
June 22nd.
Okay.
Yes. So we do know that that's where they were because they're on the tape.
How did that tape,
Kyle,
if I may ask, how did that tape get discovered? Is it because Kyle said they stopped in at a convenience store and then the police went there? Or was it just by luck, or how did it get started?
No, Kyle said that that's where they had stopped.
All right. So his story checked out.
Yep, he was telling the truth.
Okay.
So this is the big mystery. Where Shannah actually got out of the car, where her scent was picked up, and where this town is, where they were seen, it's only a 45-minute drive. So you have from 10:30 to 3 o'clock, and Kyle does not know what they did.
Has never explained what they were doing.
All he said is that Shannah picked up some drugs in Menominee that she was using because she was in trouble anyways. So what's the difference?
Okay.
And I don't know, for those that know about addiction, is when you quit, when you're done, you don't start back out with when you go into and you relapse. You don't start back down on the low dose. You start back up where you left off. On
the big dose.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's when people overdose. Is because your body.
But that's not what Kyle said. Kyle didn't say she overdosed. He said she ran off into the woods.
Yep, he said she ran off into the woods. She was high. And but first he said that she had ran off into this other section of woods. And she had ran out of the car. And she had shoes on. And she had her purse. And that they run 94. They had passed a cop. And she got paranoid. And she thought that Kyle had called the cops and was going to get her arrested. This is what he's telling us. And that she yelled at him to stop the car. She got out of the car and she took off running.
Now, let me ask you something. Hold on a second, if I may. Now, they're in Shannah's car, not Kyle's car. Shannah's car.
Right.
Okay. But he's driving.
Yes.
Okay. So he is saying that unless she jumped out while the car was moving, he's saying that he actually pulled over to the side of the road, and that's when she jumped out twice.
Right.
Okay. All right. So she jumps out once. He manages to get her back in the car. She jumps out again. She never comes back. That's what we're supposed to understand, even though Kyle is the one that's driving.
Right.
Oh, okay. All right. On this videotape that was mentioned, is it not shown that, and we're going to get back to that paycheck here in a moment, but is it also not shown that Shannah accessed her checking accounts or something to get some money?
It shows her at an ATM. Whose account it was, we're not, we don't know. But we don't know if it was hers or Kyle's because they both worked. So we don't know. But all we know is that she's seen taking money out of the ATM.
Okay, and how much was it?
It was around $500 is what Kyle was saying is what they had taken out of the ATM, and that she had, and then the other cash that they had on was what she had from what she cashed her check from.
Right, and we'll get back to that second. I want to talk about that check in a bit. Okay, so they go to this place. They're seen on video, and it would have usually only taken 45 minutes to get from that convenience store to where Kyle says she jumped out of the car, but it seemingly took like 4.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Kyle has never explained why it took that long.
No, he had just said that Shannah was, flipping out, and that they just kind of cruised around back roads for 4.5 hours.
Okay, all right. And you've already also explained that in the direction that they were going north, this was not the direction to California.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is where I want to talk about this paycheck. Please, let's go over this again. This Amy McNamara, who worked with Shannah, brought Shannah her check on Tuesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
That would be right. June 21st. And then they are saying that Amy got into the car with Kyle and Shannon. They took off, and at some point they dropped Amy off.
Right.
Okay. And you said that Shannah cashed her check somewhere, and when we say cash, she gave them the check. She got money back. How much was that
mm-hmm.
check worth?
It was a little over $600.
Okay. Now, there is something about this pay stub. Why don't you tell the listeners, where was this pay stub and what was on it?
Well, the pay stub was still in her, it was at her house.
Okay.
And on the pay stub, on the back of it, was written Amy's name and Amy's phone number.
Okay.
And also there was a name of old boyfriend. His name was Sage Giles, and he actually lived in California at that time.
Huh, all right. So
numbers were written.
All right, so he is a new guy, a new person being brought into all of this. Shannon knew him from years ago, like you said, ex-boyfriend, now living in California, and his name and phone number was on this check stub. Amy McNamara's name and was on this check stub, but the check stub wasn't in the car. It was back at the house where her phone and the note were left.
Right.
Okay. All right. Have you had a chance to talk to, can you think of any reason why she would have written those two names down on a check stub, but then leave the check stub at home?
My guess is she probably forgot it because it was not by the note in her phone. The pay stub was laying on the counter. So she might have had it in her hand to remember those phone numbers because just like me, with cell phones, you don't need to remember people's numbers anymore.
That's right.
You just touch the number. So my guess is that they were probably headed to California to see Sage, and she had the number written down because she wasn't going to take her phone. And also, Amy knew they were going, so I don't know if she had Amy's number written on there, so maybe she could keep contact with her. Kind of keep a contact still in the area so she could know what was going on here. Because she knew that she would be getting, because she is really violating her probation now. And my guess is just it got sat down and she forgot it.
Okay, so you think that check stub being there was a mistake?
Right.
Okay.
I think she meant to take it with her.
Okay. Okay. Did you, I'm guessing in those days, and we'll get back to the searches on that roadside in a little bit, but have you talked to Sage? Have you called him maybe back then or even since then? Did he have any idea that Shannah could be headed to California? Did she ever call him to tell him that?
No. He, I have talked to Sage a few times. Sage was, he actually was one of the fathers that was in the paternity for the baby. And we really liked Sage a lot. Very nice young man. But He was originally from California, so when him and Shannah broke up, he just kind of ventured back that way.
Okay.
If she would have contacted him and said, "Hey, I was coming to California," he would have called us and let us know.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't. He always had Shannah's best interest at heart. But he also knew that she was, when they dated, she was, really very active in her addiction.
Right.
So.
All right. So Sage was before Stefan?
No, it was Stefan and then Sage, and then it was kind of Stefan and Sage.
Okay. So a little bit back and forth there and everything. And like you said, there at one point you thought that Sage might have even been the father of Shannah's child. All right. So, but just to be clear, Sage had no idea if Shannah had plans to go to California. He didn't know anything about it.
Right.
Okay. And you believe that?
I believe that, yes.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to the search from the Thursday and onwards. Thursday, June 23rd. We know about this dog that got overheated after 300 yards, which if it was something else, it might be kind of funny, but it's not in this situation. Any other searches done in the area on those rest of those days along the road there?
No.
None.
No. Unfortunately, Stearns County didn't really follow through with Shannah being a missing person. Actually, according to the state of Minnesota, Shannah is not a missing person. She is an adult runaway. But in Chippewa County here in Wisconsin, she is considered a missing person. So it's just kind of goofy, the different states and how their different rules go. So there were no more searches done. So anything after that day, we have organized ourselves. And, of course, it takes a lot of time to get, these things done. The area where Shannah allegedly went missing is a 780-acre swamp. It is owned by little parcels between 12 people, big like hunting land. And that particular year, there was a lot of rain that spring. Mm-hmm. So it was very flooded, very dense, lots of pickers, lots of it's a mess. Sinkholes, just horrible, a horrible place. Mm-hmm. We had to get permission from each of the landowners to be able to search the land, because it was all private. And we organized a search, and it was October 1st of 2016. We decided to kind of wait for fall, for one, because it took that long to organize and to get a hold of all the landowners. And we kind of figured because of the fall time and people, hunters are out, looking for sheds or putting up, scratch or, whatever the hunting deal. And we had read that most missing persons are found by hunters in the fall because they're watching, they know what to look for. Right. They're looking for shed and they'll see a bone. So that was one of the reasons why we did that. We ended up with a little over 200 people at our search. And because the terrain was so bad, it ended up being 2 days. It was the 1st and 2nd of October 2016. And we found nothing. We did not find any clothing. We did not find her purse. We found nothing.
Did you find any signs that any human had ever been in those woods?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
There were 3 sets of bones found that were not the team that we were working with. If someone found something, you would raise your hand and holler or whatever. So they did find different bones, and they got taken away right away by the police and sent to the National Bone Database. So, and then, then later on they had called us and said that no, it was not her. It was, whatever, but they just, they can only tell us what, if it's ours or not.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing was found. But there were a bunch of areas that we could not get to, because we had drones, we had horses, four-wheelers, but there still were areas where we couldn't get to. So later on that spring of 2017, we did another search, but we did more of a private search. And we went over areas that we felt that she could get to, because Kyle had said that she was barefooted. She had on thin leggings, and a tank top. The area where the dog tracked her, I actually walked to that exact same spot because I just felt I needed to. The pickers and the briars were so thick, and I had on a long sleeve shirt and blue jeans, and I actually had to throw my clothes away because there was just so many pickers and binders on there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously mine was in the fall and hers was in the spring, but the cops the police with the Stearns County Police Department is pretty much saying that they think that she ran so far into the woods and then that she jumped the fence and hitched a ride with a trucker. But it's the dogs never picked up a scent by the fence. The dogs never picked up any blood. They have never picked up anything.
And like you're saying, that it's so thick in there, you'd think if she was running through there, trying to get through there, maybe a branch would have snagged her clothing, maybe it would have ripped. There might be something like that. There's nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Okay.
And in the last 2.5 years, we've actually had a really very good response with help. We have had 5 different sets of cadaver dogs from all over the United States come and search that exact spot, and they have turned up nothing. Nothing.
Okay, let's talk about Amy McNamara a little bit. She was the last one who could verify that she saw Kyle and Shannah together. The story is that she got dropped off, but at least initially she was not very helpful in all of this investigation, was she?
No. My mom teaches a bunch of Christian classes to people in jail, and shortly after Shannah's disappearance, I'm going to say like 2-3 months, we didn't, we knew about Amy, but from what Kyle had said, but we didn't know where she was. Goes into the jails and teaches these Christian-based programs, and there's Amy in jail, in the Chippewa County jail. So when Shannah first went missing and we found out about Amy McNamara, we went to the Chippewa County jail, or the Chippewa County Police Department, and told them that we know that Amy McNamara, she doesn't have a very good record, and that we know that she was involved. Could they talk to her? It took the police 2 years to talk to her, and we got very upset when we found out 2 months later after Shannah went missing, Amy was in jail, and the police knew about it, and no one talked to her, and she was right around the corner there in the jail. And she wasn't there just for a couple of weeks. She was there for 9 months.
Wow, what did she do?
Drugs.
Okay. So she was, and then once finally somebody did track her down, was she helpful, or my understanding is she was unhelpful?
No, she was helpful at that point, because she was in the jail again, and I call the police department at least once a month, both of them, to just kind of see what the activity is. Are they doing anything? Just to let them know that, I'm not going away. And Amy was, so they did finally go and talk to Amy, and she did verify that she did pick up Shannah's check, that they did go to Eau Claire. But Amy said that they did drop her off at a friend's house, and that was the last time that she's seen Shannah.
Okay. And this place where she got dropped off, has that person verified that she got dropped off there? Do you know?
No, because she won't tell us. She won't tell anybody.
Well, once again, that's why I say helpful. I guess that doesn't sound very helpful to me, but I mean, if she's going to verify that she saw Shannah and Kyle, I guess. But if she's not going to say where she got dropped off, then how do we really know she got dropped off at all?
Right.
Okay. Do you think that she doesn't tell anybody this because it's probably some drug-related thing?
Yes.
Okay. And to this day, we're doing this interview on March 19th, 2019. Has Amy ever said who she got dropped off with? And where would have this been? In Chippewa Falls, or where would she have gotten dropped off at?
It was in Eau Claire.
In Eau Claire. Okay. So she's never verified where she got dropped off in Eau Claire?
No.
Never. Okay. All right. And have you had a chance to personally talk to her?
No. I get very upset when I think about her or Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just choose not to. If any of that stuff needs to be done or talked to, then Bud kind of takes over that spot.
Okay.
Because I just can't. I just can't deal with that.
Okay. All right. Let's. This always seems to come back to Kyle. He says that they were just once again to go over this at least a little bit. He says that they were going along. He's driving. Shannah freaks out. She wants out of the car. She jumps out once. She gets back in the car. They go down the road a little further. It happens again. She never returns. Of course, she is missing. Her purse is missing. All that money, by my business major math, that's about $1,100 that she had on her that's never been found, right?
Right.
Okay. There's this story of going to California, but Sage, who's kind of an ex-boyfriend of Shannah's, didn't know that she was coming there, even though his phone number was on the check stub that was still back at the apartment. Has Kyle ever taken a polygraph regarding the disappearance of Shannah?
No. When all of this happened, we asked the detective that was on the case at that time if Kyle had ever been given a polygraph. She had told us yes, that he had been given a polygraph, that he had passed, and that he was not being considered as a suspect, even though he was the last person to see her. When we did the search in October, the search and rescue team that we were working with, called United Legacy, had access and had actually gotten some of the police reports from Chippewa County. In those papers, it specifically said that Kyle had not been given a polygraph.
Okay. He had not been given one. Did he refuse to take one, or he was just never asked?
As far as I know, he was never asked.
Okay.
And now that he is being asked, now he's refusing.
Okay. All right. That might be suspicious, but there's no law that says a person must take a polygraph test, so we just don't know. It may be that he's worried about something else that has gone on in his life and not Shannah's disappearance that could maybe get him in trouble. We have to remember now, going well back into this conversation, we remember that Shannah did have domestic abuse charges against him. and those were going to be, I'm not saying coming to trial or anything, but there was something going to be going on with them, I'm guessing sometime in July. But what happened to those charges?
Magically, because of the prosecutor, she was the plaintiff, she was not there to go forward with the charges, so the charges got dropped.
Okay. And we have to remember that it was Shannah's sponsor, a person by the name of Angel, who saw one of these incidents happen. Was that not good enough to keep at least some of those charges intact, being that this person was a witness?
Apparently not.
Okay. All right. Well, we know that Shannah didn't take her phone. Did Kyle ever try to explain why she didn't take her phone?
Shannah did not take her phone because we had it monitored. We had a tracker on it, so we knew where she was at all times, and she knew that that was on there. So that's that's why she didn't take it.
Okay. What kind of tracker was this? Do you know the name of it? How was it used? I mean, we all know that our phones can be pinged and everything, but this was something a little more than that even?
Yeah, it was something that we had to pay extra for on the plan. It was some kind of device that you put in there. It was like a teenage prevention device, and I don't even know if they do it anymore. But it gave you the exact location coordinates of where she, where the phone was.
Angela, it'd be interesting if maybe after this conversation, next couple days, you could find out exactly what the name of that is. I'm sure I know I would like to look into it. I'm sure some of the listeners would like to look into it too, just to see, how that worked and how accurate and everything it would be. That might be, if you could in your time, and I know you've been very busy recently. So that's why you believe that she left her phone behind. But Kyle took his phone. Has his phone ever been pinged? Has anybody ever seen the records for those days, specifically Wednesday, the day that Shannah disappeared?
They did ping his phone, and the pings did show up in that area that, that he said that they were in, but it was his phone, so no, we were never, we couldn't look at his records.
Okay. And what has Kyle done with his life since 2016?
He actually he has been getting into a lot of trouble. He's been in and out of jail the last couple of years, drug charges, nights in jail, things like that. So not the Kyle that we were first introduced to.
All right, so it seems like maybe he put on a little bit of a show when he was living with Shannah's father under his roof. Okay, yep. If you can remind the listeners, how long do you think that Shannah and Kyle lived under Bud's roof? Remember how long that was?
They lived there about 4 months.
Okay, so not short. Not a short time. Okay. And has Kyle ever tried to explain if they were going to be going out of town, driving the whole way to California from Wisconsin, let's just say that was the truth. Is he essentially saying, would they have been able to get back in time for these domestic charges, coming to fruition?
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I don't know. I guess, I don't know. I know that the charges were sometime in July, but because they got dismissed, they're not on the record anymore.
Right.
But, my guess is they were, I guess I don't even have a guess because I wouldn't know what to say.
I guess what I'm saying is if they were going to California and she was going to go see the Pacific Ocean once before she thought she was going away to jail for a while, this might have gotten in the way of those charges, once again, coming to fruition, and, which would have been very nice for Kyle, I guess. Okay. Now, there is something, though, that we haven't talked about yet, that is kind of the kicker in all of this is that after the fact, how much trouble would Shannah have gotten in had she stuck around? And with this breathalyzer, how big of a trouble would she have gotten in? What have you found out about that?
I found out that she would maybe have sat just a couple days in jail and that's it. Nothing would have happened.
Well, that's very interesting, Angela. I got to tell you, if she thought that she was going to be going to jail for a while, that is certainly in contrast to what you personally found out yourself. Were you surprised by that?
No, I actually was not surprised by that because she had done worse things than that. And didn't get into any. I mean, maybe spent the weekend in jail or something, and that was about it.
So is it, and once again, I know listeners probably saying they don't believe this California trip story, and I'm not saying that I necessarily do either, but we realize that the note was written by Shannah herself. Okay, and we know that she did miss work on her own and all of these things. So is it your interpretation then that maybe Shannah overreacted to what happened with this breathalyzer those days before?
Yes.
Any reason you can think of that she might have overreacted like that? Do you think that that was something that was brought on by her own psyche, or do you think that it was possibly something that Kyle maybe fed into, and telling her, oh, man, you're going to be in big trouble now? What do you think?
I don't think that Kyle fed into it. I think Shannah did. We come from a family of overreactors. So I do believe that she blew out a little bit out of proportion, thinking that if she would have said something to me about it, I would have reassured her that let's just take the consequences. You'd be up and honest, and we'll take care of it. But I do think she overreacted, but she also knew that she had gotten way more chances than anybody else in the drug court system. Like I said, that was her strike number 9, and you're only supposed to get 3.
Right. Yeah, that is I think the kicker in all of this. I think that I'm not saying that running away from the law is the right thing, but if somebody thinks they're going away for a long time, then maybe some people are going to do that. I'm not saying that's right. But being that you found out later that the penalty would not have been that harsh, which kind of make sense. It's alcohol. It's not drugs. And you've verified that. This isn't something we're making up. It was for alcohol. There's no belief that she was doing meth or heroin again, is there?
No.
There's no proof of that. Maybe it might be a rumor, but there's no proof of that.
Right.
Okay, there's no proof of that. So it does seem that it might just be a couple days in jail, but for some reason it seems that Shannah was thinking otherwise. It seems, although I'm not sure the rest of the story with California, everything all checks out. Okay. There was a rumor. We don't usually like to talk about rumors, but this one I thought was especially relevant considering what Cal says might have happened. There was a woman seen running on the road that day that Shannah disappeared. How did you find out about that? And what do you think about it? First of all, what is the exact story that you heard? Maybe start there.
It was in that same area, that same little town, St. Augustine, which is a very small rural town. I think the population is 200. But it's right off of I-94, so I think a lot of people stop there for gas station or snacks, bathroom, whatever. The cops, I can't remember if it was it had to have been the police that had said that someone had reported that they had seen Shannah, that she was walking on the side of the road, and that there was either mint green or light blue Prius and there had a gentleman in there kind of trying to coax her to get into the car. So they looked into it, and we don't know who it was, but they verified that it was not Shannah.
All right. So that was a rumor that did not check out.
Right.
So that was a rumor that didn't check out. Okay, it was not
Right.
Shannah, but there is proof that maybe this story wasn't exactly a rumor. It was actually something that was true, but it didn't have anything to do with Shannah.
Right.
Okay. It's going to be 3 years in a few months, Angela. What has this been like for you?
It's been very hard. It's taken a big toll on all of my family. My girls, Autumn and Dakota, they were little and they had a older sister that protected them and played with them, and they watched this person fade away into someone that they couldn't stand being around. My husband and I, your child is gone. First you watch them get swallowed up by addiction, and then they're gone. We're not the same people anymore. You go and you put your happy face on and you do what you need to do, but when you're home and you're alone, all you do is think. I do not watch the news anymore because of the, here's a dead body cut up, here's a sex traffic, here's a body that got found overdosed. Every time you see something like that, you're reliving the disappearance of your child all over.
Right.
Again, because
right.
Every day I think about her and I think, what happened to her, and it's a personal hell every day.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to guess that it's this was also a surprise because you thought that Shannah was on the right path, and it seems like she was. To me, having a couple beers and the breathalyzer, it sounds like she was drinking and driving. I realized that she wasn't supposed to be doing that, but given everything else she had done with those last few years, that doesn't seem like big of a deal, even though I know she wasn't supposed to be doing it. So it seems like she's on the right path, and then this happens. That has to make it especially tough.
Right. Yes, it does.
Yeah. What of Shannah's two younger sisters, how old are they now?
24 and 19.
24 and 19. So one of them is even now older than Shannah was when she disappeared.
Yes.
And, how do you think that they've handled it? I'm not trying to get into their lives, but how are they doing?
It's something that we talk about, and we just, we deal with it when it comes up. I think that they're doing okay. It's just, everybody kind of has their mindset. Sometimes, we just think that she's just gone to rehab. She's gone to rehab and she's just, she's not there. And some days we just get together and we just cry because we don't know where she is. But I think as a family, I think we are doing, and being a split family, I think we're doing okay. I just, but I find myself now, I'm a little more protective of the two girls, even though they are adults. Now they don't live with me. I find that, I'm still very protective. I'm calling nonstop. I want to know where they are, where they're going, who they're with. Because I already lost one. I don't want to lose another one.
Sure. And what about Shannah's father? Obviously, I've not had a chance to speak to him, but I know he's been involved in this. Of course, he was the first one out there on the side of the road when Kyle called him. And how has he handled this? If you can speak for him, if you can.
He feels, very similar to how I feel. every day you kind of beat yourself up because you don't know, because, it's always, could I have did this different? Could I have did this different? How come we didn't know?
Yeah.
It's just something that you just have to learn to deal with it because there's nothing else you can do. There's not support groups for, sorry, my kid's missing. There's not a Hallmark card that you can go and buy that says, hey, I'm sorry, your kid's missing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it really difficult. When you go to do things, you just hope people don't know, like, what's their story. We don't want people to feel sorry for us, or we don't want, and it's very hard.
Mm-hmm.
You try to live your life as normal as you can, but there's always this little cloud that people like, oh, those are the people that their kids missing,
Yeah, a little bit of a stigma.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you have a website or a Facebook page, anything like that set up for Shannah?
Yes, we do. We have Help Find Shannah Boiteau on Facebook. You can just find that on there.
Okay.
So, and that's pretty much what we have.
Okay.
There has been no updates. There has been actually no leads, no anything for the last year and a half.
Wow.
And it's just kind of goofy because when she first went missing, there was all kinds of stuff. And then we did some fundraising and stuff to offer a reward, to think that would help bring out some more leads. And ever since we've had the reward, we've actually had zero.
Yeah. Yeah, rewards don't exactly do what everybody thinks they do. And I have to say, as a person who I would say has become a missing persons expert, there's not a lot of evidence that rewards work at all. It's like people are going to talk or they're not going to talk. People are, police are going to go question the right people or they're not. And I think it's usually people's consciences that finally make people come forward, not the money.
Sure.
So I wouldn't be too downhearted about the reward situation because that's the way it is most of the time. 99% of the time, it's like that.
Sure.
So, okay. So please say that Facebook page again. Why not? Why don't you, Angela?
Help Find Shannah Boiteau.
Okay. Angela, any last words before we complete this interview?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to, do this podcast with you, and hopefully someone out there can, help us lead us to our daughter.
Okay, Angela. I appreciate being on the program, and you can guarantee that Unfound, myself and my assistants and the listeners will always be here for you. And I, of course, hope that Shannah is found alive sometime very soon. That's what we'll all be working forward, even though, as I always tell guests, that I will be moving on to the next case for next Friday, but I keep in contact with all of my guests, virtually all of my guests. And I'm only just an email or phone call away. I want to assure you of that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was my March 2019 interview with Angela, mother of Shannah Boiteau. It seems like yesterday we had that talk. Where does the time go? So now I'm going to read the original blog I wrote on Patreon for all the Patreon supporters. This is the blog that I continue to write to this day here in 2025 for episodes of Unfound that come out. And it's patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, and if anybody is interested. But this was my original analysis from 2019. I got Shannah's disappearance very wrong. And after I'm done reading what I wrote back then, I'm going to take a look at why I got it wrong and how my mind has changed regarding this type of disappearance since then, it's been about 6 years since this episode came out originally. All right, I will start here. As you all know, the reason we don't theorize too much on Unfound is because I want to make sure the listeners are thinking for themselves. If I or the guest starts spouting off theories, I believe it subconsciously works on listeners and influences what they think. And that is the last thing I want. Having said that, raise your hand if you don't believe Kyle's story about Shannah running off into the woods. Exactly, almost all of you raised your hands. I guess what I'm saying here is there are just some cases that no matter how well Unfound covers what was said, what was seen, what was heard, there's still the feeling of, nope, that didn't happen. And this is all my overall thought as I write about Shannah's case right now at about 11 a.m. Eastern Time on March 22nd of 2019. And I remind you, just to jump in here for a second, I'm recording this on May 6th of 2025, so over 6 years ago. And already you're saying how wrong I got this. But you should know something, and I'm not sure it was evident in the interview. Angela does believe Kyle's story. Yes, really. Despite the searches done, despite Kyle benefiting from Shannah's disappearance, despite Kyle's behavior since then, Angela believes that. In addition, once again, we didn't talk about it because there are no facts to support it. Angela believes that someone else could have been with Kyle and Shannah that day besides Amy McNamara. Why does Angela believe these things? I'm not going to get into that, but the reason I'm telling you this is because my thoughts on Shannah's disappearance differ greatly from Angela's. Although I will say I think through some reasoning with Angela that she will start doing some searches and questioning back in the town where Shannah and Kyle were last seen on video. Once again, to jump in on this recording, you're seeing how much I got this wrong. But I'm not perfect, and we're going to talk about that after I get to the end of this blog. Why don't I believe the story? Well, maybe I should be asking, why don't you believe Kyle's story? I'm sure our answers would be quite the same. Let me list them anyway. The time discrepancy between them being seen in the video and where they were on the highway later. Kyle's court date coming up. Kyle was already known to be a con man, hiding his true nature from even Shannah's father. Kyle making a pass at Jody, the host of that other show, not long after Shannah disappeared. Hard to believe Kyle would travel with Shannah to California if she intended on seeing another guy. The jealousy Kyle had against Stefan. I think those are most of the reasons. I might have missed a couple, as if 6 reasons isn't enough, right? Or aren't enough. Yet on the other hand, Kyle did do more than most obvious suspects that have been mentioned on Unfound since September of 2016. Many of the guys we've talked about in the past would have just said, oh, I don't know, she was in the car, then she wasn't. Why didn't I call anybody? Well, I thought she'd show up sooner or later. We know these cases, Rosemary Rapp, Julie Early, James Walker, etc. We have to remember Kyle at least did something. He called Shannah's father. You may be suspicious that he didn't call the police. Me, I'm not. Because if Kyle was going to stick to the story that Shannah jumped out of the car because she saw a police car, then calling the police would be the last thing Kyle would do. Sticking to the logic of his story, that is. So calling Shannah's father makes sense. Hey, at least Kyle called somebody. But I believe Kyle had the confidence to call Bud, Shannah's father, because Kyle knew that Shannah wouldn't be found in the woods. Because Shannah didn't jump out of the car. Not there, not somewhere else, not ever. Plus, Kyle knew how well he fooled Bud when Kyle was living at Bud's house. Kyle managed to portray himself as a caring boyfriend, which he wasn't. Thus, Kyle knew he could fool Bud one more time. Well, then what did happen? Where did Shannah disappear? Why and how? Before I get to that, we must be clear about something. Why did Shannah think she was going to be going to jail for so long when her family discovered quite quickly that Shannah would have only gotten a slap on the wrist? I stand by the theme for the episode, fear. I truly think Shannah feared the worst. She had every reason to do that. She'd been in and out of jail several times. Then she seemingly straightens her life out, only to be done in by alcohol. So I can understand her reaction. What still makes no sense is her allegedly wanting to go see the Pacific Ocean, drive like 2,000 miles away to do it, and make everything even worse for her once she came back to Wisconsin to serve her time. Whether it was going to be for a year or 10 years. this takes much more theorizing on my part. However, I think this is where Kyle really comes into this. I'm inclined to believe that Kyle fed into Shannah's fear. He was a manipulator after all. I can certainly see him saying, you know, you're going to go to jail for a while. That's a big deal. Failing that breathalyzer, oh yeah, you're going away, just like any mental abuser would do. Shannah didn't have a man who would say, hey, we're going to work through this. It's not going to be as bad as you think. We can get a lawyer and fight this if you're going to be in jail for a while. You know, somebody who would keep Shannah calm and rational. Kyle was the opposite. To bring up a good comparison, remember the girl who was convicted who egged her boyfriend on to kill himself? Well, I think Kyle is very much like her. Kyle didn't put the idea in Shannah's head to run, but he was certainly going to make it blossom if Kyle thought he could drive Shannah nuts because of it. And Kyle had his own personal motivations too, those abuse charges. He could have figured, hey, we get out of here, we go wherever, those court dates pass, and I don't have to worry about going to jail. Yet something went wrong, because despite the upcoming court date, I don't believe Kyle intended to make Shannah disappear, at least not when they left on Tuesday. What I believe is Kyle's plan backfired on him. He really pushed Shannah toward the runoff angle, not realizing that Shannah took it one step further by planning to meet an ex-boyfriend while they were at the Pacific Ocean. This pissed Kyle off. He had the perfect plan, only for Shannah's own desires to get in the way. I think what happened was Shannah wrote Sage's and Amy's phone numbers down on the paycheck stub because she wasn't taking her phone. These were two numbers Shannah would need. For Sage, well, we know the reason. For Amy, because she and Shannah were friends and Shannah wanted to keep in touch with her while she was gone. But Shannah forgets the stub in her apartment, possibly due to her being in a rush to get out. Kyle and Shannah pack up, leave. Well, at some point, Shannah cashes her check. It is at that point that she realizes the paycheck stub isn't with the check. Why is that? Well, it could be Kyle himself separated the two because he saw Sage's number on the stub. Because in my experience, people don't tear away the stub from a paycheck until the moment it's cashed. Of course, your personal experience may vary. It could even be that Kyle told Shannah, yeah, I got your check, and Shannah remembered the stub was still attached to the check, so she wasn't worried. Then, when she goes to cash the check, she realizes the stub isn't there. She immediately thinks that Bastard Kyle, he ripped off the stub because he saw Sage's number on it. Shannah goes back to the car. She and Kyle have a fight about the stub, and Kyle kills her. Maybe some of you thought I would go toward the drug angle. Shannah wanted to shoot up since she knew she was already going to jail. No reason to try to stay clean now. Totally sensible story. In addition, maybe Kyle even gave her a hot shot to kill her, once again for the reasons stated above. Yet what I think about is that $1,100 Shannah collected between her paycheck and the ATM. To me, that amount of money tells me she fully believed she was going to California. Yes, a part of it might have been meant for heroin or whatever else, but there's no doubt that money was California money. But we have to remember something. There are certainly reasons to believe Kyle never intended on going to California, despite those charges coming up. Sage, for one reason, and the other being that Kyle wasn't even on a road to California when he called Bud. What I'm saying is Kyle didn't have a motivation to go to California. His most likely and only motivation was to keep Shannah away from Chippewa Falls when the court dates came up. Sure, maybe Shannah would decide to forget about the whole thing and drop the charges. Very possible. But could Kyle take that chance? Kyle take a chance with that? Well, here's what I know. As soon as Shannah noticed the paycheck stub wasn't there and wanted to go back home to get it, and Kyle wouldn't have wanted to, Kyle could be almost assured that Shannah would continue to press the abuse charges. She would know Kyle planned something underhanded against her. How does that relate to the drug angle? Well, I believe the cashing of the paycheck is what led to Shannah's death. Right at the second she would have known what Kyle did or what Kyle didn't want to do, go back to get the stub, and the fight would have started right then, that second, that very moment. Would she really have gotten high with him with that going on in her head? I realize drugs can be a great attraction, but I think the stub would be the last straw for Shannah. What I'm also thinking is Kyle wouldn't have allowed Shannah to blow some of that $1,100 on drugs if Kyle thought he could have all the money to himself. Drugs or not, any money that is spent on drugs is less for Kyle if he wanted to kill Shannah. The time discrepancy, that 4.5 hours it took them to travel 45 miles or whatever. That was the time Kyle spent finding a place to dispose of Shannah's body. I believe she was dead not long after she was seen on the video. Kyle disposed of her body, then drove out onto the highway and called Bud, telling him that Shannah ran off. Why didn't Kyle actually pick a road that actually leads to California? Maybe he's horrible with directions. Maybe tried but couldn't find an area by the correct highway that was thick enough with brush. I don't know. I should say that another idea crossed my mind. Could it be Kyle entertained the idea of running to Canada after killing Shannah, then decided against it? Because you need a passport to get into Canada these days. Maybe he decided his lying was good enough that he could deflect any suspicion of his guilt. And it seems he was right. How does someone go about proving any of what I've written? Well, it's not going to be easy. The good news is that the case is fairly new. The bad news is that there is seemingly no evidence to support my theory. My hope is that Kyle didn't kill Shannah in her car. I'm hoping that for some reason they might have gotten a hotel room after visiting the store wide to get it on, to prepare to buy drugs and shoot up, etc. Because my thinking was also that it's hard to kill a person in a car unless a person is strangled from behind, meaning Kyle in the back seat and Shannah in the front. Or a gun was used, but that would leave blood and stuff everywhere. Likewise, an overdose would leave telltale signs, throw up, all around the interior of the vehicle. So once again, I'm hoping a hotel room was part of this crime. What can Angela do? Despite Angela's belief that Shannah disappeared on that highway, I convinced her that a canvassing of the area around the convenience store should be done. Go to all the seedier hotels with Kyle and Shannah's pictures. Politely ask if records from the disappearance date could be viewed. Angela admitted nobody has ever thought of this. I'm taking for granted that police got their hands on Kyle's phone records, but we don't know what they say. Angela should try to find out who Kyle was talking to the day Shannah disappeared. Next, Amy McNamara must continue to be leaned on by Angela and her family. Remember, Amy won't discuss where she was dropped off that day. Well, that could mean she wasn't dropped off at all. In fact, maybe Amy was a witness to Shannah's murder. I would try to find out if Kyle made any conspicuous purchases after Shannah disappeared. Remember, that $1,100 hasn't been found yet either. It allegedly vanished with Shannah. Shannah's car, wherever it is, should be checked. To be blunt, I think the trunk should be checked for any signs of her hair or blood. There would be no reason for either to be there. I guess what I'm also saying is that I believe it's irrelevant to search the area besides the highway anymore. Totally irrelevant. That's all I have. If there are any updates, you'll be the first to know. Thanks for reading, and thanks for the support. And that ended the blog I wrote back in 2019 regarding Shannah Boiteau's disappearance. Obviously, I was way off. Way off. And certainly, Kyle did not cause Shannah's death, at least in the way that was portrayed here in this blog. And so, where did I go wrong? What was my analysis, my opinion, my theory on what happened? Where did I go wrong with this? And what has changed since then for us to have on Unfound a disappearance very similar to this with Dwayne Thomas, where, although it may not be obvious to all of you, that I really do believe that Dwayne Thomas walked off. So what has changed in 6 years? I'm going to get into that now. So where I went wrong back in 2019 and what should I have taken more seriously back then in 2019 when I wrote that blog? We'll start here with number 1. Kyle calling Shannah's dad. In retrospect, calling a father could lead to trouble for a suspect more than calling the police would be. Why? The father might show up with a gun and be looking for revenge. Police are usually restricted by the law. Overall, killers don't call their victims' parents for help or act like good Samaritans like Kyle seemingly did. The Kyle called anybody really should have been enough for me to believe that, you know what, I think he's telling the truth. Because as we've seen in many other disappearances that are also resolved, we don't get a lot of that. It's the woman goes missing and there's no phone calls, there's no emails, there's no social media presence, nothing. No calling out, hey, have you seen this woman anywhere? There's nothing. That Kyle called Shannah's dad should have been at the forefront of my mind. Why? Like I said, it easily could have been that Kyle could have just kept on driving wherever he wanted to go, didn't call anybody, as it usually goes when there's foul play, and then somebody finally tracks the guy down and goes, oh, I just dropped her off the corner. I don't know what happened to her. That's what usually happens. But being that Kyle did what he did in retrospect, I really should have taken that to heart. Point number 2, if Kyle killed her, Kyle should have been able to come up with a better way to distance himself from the disappearance. He could have said he dropped Shannah off somewhere. He could have said she went into a store and never came out. He could have done a lot of different things. But instead, he put himself there on that street, on that highway. Remember, killers like to get away with their crimes, whereas Kyle's story put him right there at the scene. In other words, the story that he told, although certainly unusual, certainly nobody disputes that. They're going along, pull over to the side of the road, and she runs off. Certainly unusual. But maybe it was just unusual enough to be true. In addition, to add into this number 2 point, is I probably was just looking at this too logically. And this is something that it's kind of been a kick of mine. It's kind of been on this kick for like a year or two now. But this whole thing about using common sense to try to decipher all of this, can't do it. Because people are unpredictable. And we don't know what mental condition they're in, physical condition, what's going on in their minds. So we try to think of things in a logical way. And that usually doesn't go anywhere. And I think, once again, back then, 6 years ago, I was thinking of this in a very logical way. Well, surely that didn't happen. Well, 200 and some disappearances later, it does happen. In all the news that I read, it does happen. A lot. So that is point number 2. Number 3, missing people lie. This is probably something you will not hear on any other true crime production anywhere in the world. But missing people lie. It's documented over and over and over again on this podcast, where people say things and there's enough information found after their disappearances, whether the disappearance is solved or not, that the person lied for some reason. Certainly could be sometimes that they're being forced to do that, but I think a lot of times they do it all on their own, maybe to mislead people. Maybe they really don't know what they're saying. Lots of possible reasons. But we should never just automatically believe what missing people say right before they go missing. We should try to verify what they're saying as being the truth or not. Just don't believe it because we feel sorry for the family. We still feel sorry for the friends. Maybe we feel it's a little insulting to say or think that a missing person would lie. We have to throw all of that out the window. We just have to. So for Shannah, this is something that I could have never guessed before I started Unfound, that missing people lie before they go missing. A lot of them tell the truth, but you have to verify it. But a lot of them do lie. Not something up until I started this podcast I could have ever imagined. But this is a point that the general public surely does not know, and maybe many of you in the audience probably still don't realize how often this happens. But now here in 2025, I have to say, I doubt whether Shannah really intended to go to California or anywhere else. And really, who knows what she had planned for any day after the day that she ended up going missing. This is something that's in my mind that we have to think that maybe Shannah was not in her right mind. And maybe if she was going to California, it was for different reasons that nobody really knows. And that alone, for me, as the person who does this for work and reads all the missing persons news, all of you don't do that, I do. I should have questioned that a little bit more, because if you get to the point where you start thinking, well, missing people lie, does it really seem like she was going to California? Well, you know what? They were on a road that would have not been on the route to California. That should have then led me to some of the things that I've already said already about believing Kyle's story instead of not believing it, for example. I'm going to keep saying this. Missing people lie for all sorts of reasons. And number 4, don't trust searches. So let's just admit something. Maybe just not for me, but a lot of people have looked at Shannah Boiteau's disappearance. Let's just be honest with this. Searches were done. She wasn't found back then. And a lot of people just went to, Kyle was lying. Kyle did something to her. This shows what happens when searches fail. This is what happens. Don't trust searches. Back then, I made the mistake that so many people still make, including the police, private investigators, and experienced searchers themselves, that when they don't find a missing person during a search, this woman ran off into the woods. This woman or man ran down this road this way. He went this way, went that way. And these searches are done and the missing person isn't found, does not mean the person isn't there. All it means is that the person hasn't been found yet. And that's not just a little play on words or some, riddle or anything. But when searches are done and the missing person isn't found, nobody should automatically think the person isn't there. Now, granted, the person might not be there, but it shouldn't be automatic. And as I continue to say, you search an area, you search it again. You search it again, you search it again, you search it again, you search it again. Too often, and maybe because too many people want it to be, involving foul play, and they want to believe a cow type is lying and everything else, when a search is not successful, it just feeds into what people are already thinking, and it's confirmation bias, which means it's not logical thinking. It's not straightforward thinking. It's not clear thinking. So once again, when you don't find a missing person during a search, that does not mean the person isn't there. All it means is that the person hasn't been found yet. And what's interesting to me, in the statements made last week by Shannah's mother, she explains and accepts why Shannah was missing during the searches back then and wasn't found at that time. And so I'm going to read what she wrote recently on Shannah's page regarding why she thinks searches were not successful back when Shannah went missing. So you can just listen to her. I'm going to read it right now. This is a post that was made on May 1st. I'm not going to read the entire post. I'm just going to go down to the second paragraph. We also want to give an update so people are aware of some basic info, as that is what we have. She was found not far, a few hundred yards from where she went into the woods. We know there's a lot of speculation on how we missed her or how the dogs missed her. Trust me, we feel the same way. We were part of the search efforts, and it kills us to know that we were so close and failed to bring her home. It wasn't for a lack of trying. We often said she ran into one of the worst woods that we've ever been in, from buckthorn to briars and burning nettles, blackberry thorns and vines. What wasn't a tangled mess was a swamp. And when we went to search in October of that year, so back in October of 2016, most of the swamps were flooded due to a very wet summer. A couple areas you couldn't get into because of that fact. It was in one of those areas that she was found. With the good fortune of that area having drought conditions, the area she was at was exposed. We thank God that the landowner happened to be out that way, and by the grace of God went in a direction he normally wouldn't have, because it's usually flooded, and found our baby girl. It wasn't the outcome we had prayed for, but now we know and can bring her home. So Shannah's mother herself is really saying what I've been saying for a lot of time about searches, even though I've only ever been involved in one search in my entire life, and that was for Stephen Kocher when I lived back in Las Vegas. That would have been April of 2010, and that was out, of course, in a desert atmosphere. There wasn't a tree in sight. What have I said? That I think a lot of times searches fail because searchers just don't go in the tough areas. They say they do, but they don't. And there's a lot of other things. I'm not saying this was necessarily involved in Shannah's disappearance and the people involved, but you get people out there that are looky-loos. Call out, hey, we need people to search this area. There's a missing person. You get people who just have nothing better to do. They maybe want to put something on their social media page about being involved. They're there for all the wrong reasons. And then on top of that, you have a tough area to search. This is the reality of searches, not what other people tell you about. Well, we're going to use drones, and we're going to use dogs, and we're going to use ATVs, and man, we're going to cover every square inch. That does not happen. It does not happen. And unfortunately, because searches fail, then people start looking in other areas and other directions, including me regarding Shannah's disappearance, and we start pointing fingers like I did. That was wrong, and that's why I'm talking about this. Can't do that. So searches fail. Now, what's also interesting is that going back through my notes, it's very interesting to me regarding Shannah's mother. I think she really did believe, I think she got it right. She was the one that got it right, and I was the one that got it wrong. It's very often the opposite. But I think she really did believe that Shannah ran off. And I was the one who said that I didn't believe she did. It's very interesting switching. That is not my experience in talking to most guests. But I think, although this didn't necessarily come out at the time, but in retrospect, now that I see what she wrote on the Facebook page just a few days ago, I think the reason she thought that Shannah was still out there somewhere, really did run off and was near there, is because she knew the searches were not as complete as they could be. I didn't have that in my notes, her saying anything about that, but maybe just didn't want to talk about that. Maybe felt that, she had gotten so much help, and she says something like that. Maybe people take it the wrong way. But my insight, I've not spoken to her since all of this come out. I've not spoken to Angela in quite a long time. But I wonder if she thought that Shannah was out there. Yeah, I think Shannah ran off and she's out there somewhere because she knew that areas had been missed, and she wasn't as quick as maybe others were, including myself, to point the finger at Kyle, because she knew the searches weren't complete, and she could be thinking, well, if he told the truth and she really ran off, knowing how thick it is in there, and I know areas didn't get searched, she could still be in there. Very, very possible. Now, I should say something at this point. So those are the main 4 points that I know now that I didn't know back then. And if you're wondering where Shannah's disappearance falls in Unfound's repertoire of or catalog of disappearances, let me see here on the list. It was number 121. We're now on number 363. So almost exactly 2/3 of the disappearances ago. We have featured roughly 240 since then. If you can believe it. Like I said, I don't know where the time goes. So if you're wondering, so 120 disappearances of experience into Unfound. I think my thinking was still, roughly, almost 3 years, not quite 3 years into Unfound's existence. Still working on learning stuff. But now, almost 9 years into doing this, I get a lot of these right. I keep track of this. I'm in the 95, 97% accuracy rate when it comes to predicting what has happened in disappearances. Not just ones Unfound is covered either. So, now I should say at least one more thing. So those are the 4 points where I messed up back then. Now I should say, this is not to say that I think Kyle told the entire truth. My guess is they were probably doing illegal things, doing drugs or something in the car. It's a guess. Just a guess. I also have to be open to the idea that they might have been having an argument, and Shannah demanded him to pull over to the side of the road, or he pulled over to the side of the road because he was all ticked off. He's driving. She's in the passenger seat. He pulls over to the side of the road. Shannah's all worried that he's going to get violent with her, and so she takes off. I'm open to that. Once again, no proof of that. And it very well may be that the reason she ran off, that he might have been chasing her. I'm not saying he would have killed her or anything, but if they were doing drugs, who knows what was in their minds, if that was going on. But the truth is, we're never going to know. It's really neither here nor there now. Shannah ran off. She made a choice to do that. And unfortunately, she died in the process of doing that. And no, I do not believe that Kyle killed her and went out into that swamp and dumped her. No, I do not believe that. That's crazy. So we just have to take Kyle's word for the rest of his life on what exactly happened that day. Although like I said, I'm still doubtful whether he's telling the truth. All I will believe now is that he had nothing criminal to do anything with her disappearance. But I could believe that if she was afraid of him and she took off, I could certainly see that. But that's as far as I'm willing to go to involve Kyle in Shannah's disappearance. So I blew this one. I'm owning up to it. But still, like I said, my success rate with predictions on disappearances is well over 90% now. Almost 9 years into this podcast. I keep track of this information. When Unfound disappearances do get solved, I go back to my notes. I look back at the outline that I did for the guest, because I'm here to learn. I like being right. Everybody knows about my trivia success, my team's trivia success here in Pinellas County. I like to be right. And I'm always going to be, of course, it's theoretical now. I can't be 100% correct because I've already missed some, but I'm always going to be looking to move that number from 95% to 96% to 97% to 98% accuracy. Because that shows who does and who does not understand disappearances. And really, I think when it comes to disappearances, I think I'm the only person, I mean, maybe in the world who does that, who makes predictions about how disappearances are going to be resolved and what is the theory that is going to be correct. I'm going to guess I'm the only person in the world that does that, but it is my job to do that. But that's the only way I think we're going to get any better at solving disappearances, is understanding them and be able to predict actually what happened, and then point an investigation in that direction, because otherwise there's no facts to go on. There's just nothing. These are not murders. So you have to be able to look at the information in front of you, even though it doesn't even look like anything necessarily has happened except for the person being missing, and be able to know what to do. What is the most likely outcome of this kind of disappearance, and investigate in that direction, because the facts are not going to tell you any direction to go in. And before I go, Unfound sends its deepest sympathies to Shannah's family. And that's the program. I'm Ed Dunsel, and you've been listening to Unfound.